So you've also worked with PTSD and smell. So how have your discoveries informed training operations for the military?
Well, we've done some work understanding essentially how odors can be associated with stress states. And in fact, in non-military personnel, we established a protocol for having someone become stressed in the laboratory while they were in the presence of an odor, and then would bring them back in a week or two and simply have them do a task, but then slowly infuse the odor that had been associated with stress in there. And we would be measuring things like their heart rate, their respiration rate, skin conductance, all measures of arousal, as well as their ability to do the task. And what we found is that even that one experience with a neutral odor, one that they didn't have a lot of familiarity with, when it was paired with stress, was enough to cause them to have a stress response a week or two later when just re-exposed to that odor. And so thinking about this in the context of how people deployed in very dangerous, scary situations in the military often are exposed to novel odors in a culture, cooking odors, agricultural odors, things that might be different than their town in Iowa or New York City. And now they're experiencing this stress in the presence of odors that are unique to a military deployment. That can become so associated that when stressful thing, and let's face it, their stress is going to be way higher than the stress that I provided to my experimental participants in Monell, where all they had to do was give a public speech and do backward subtraction, of numbers. That can come back and be a persistent problem even when they're back home again. And what we find is that even things that are similar to the odors that they experienced can revive those awful memories. And that is really a form of PTSD. So obviously, when we did these studies, we found that if you were exposed to these odors, these unique odors in our participants prior to the stressful situation, it almost inoculated you, prevented you from having that stress memory association to the odor. And so that was our recommendation, is that training should involve exposure to odors that are going to be experienced in the deployment zone, so that they would not have the ability to become associated with the obviously the stressful situations that one would encounter.
It's also interesting to think about that it's not just the typical smells of war that we may think of when we think of war, but also these maybe certain cooking smells or certain smells that might be native to that environment. I haven't thought about that before, so that's
Yeah,
new for
yeah,
me.
yeah.
And so then in the military trainings, did they do that? They tried to introduce smells that would be part of the environment in which they would be fighting.
Yeah, I've not been part of that. My work was here at Monell in the laboratory and
Okay.
just telling them, but in conversations with individuals who are part of that effort, my understanding is that there has been more incorporation of to be experienced odors in the training environment. And that's particularly true given that a lot of the deployment situations are in small towns and cities now, where you're not out in a field and you're only experiencing the smell of gunfire, right? You may be in a city where, or a small town where there are unique odors associated with that. And so that pre-knowledge and the pre-inoculation of having been exposed to it before you're under stress can be very valuable.
And it's much easier to be introduced early to the scent in a way which could be considered or less stressful than to be introduced to the odor when you're stressed and then try to undo that feeling.
Yes.
It's almost impossible, right?
We can extinguish those kinds of associations in therapists' offices, but it is difficult. It takes many experiences to reduce the power of that odor to bring back those memories. And it also requires the individual to re-experience both the odor and the memory again. So it's not easy and it's not pleasant. It can be done. I've done it myself when I had an experience with a mugger who was a glue sniffer. And for months afterwards, just the smell of glue, without me realizing it, would cause my heart to race. And I eventually extinguished that association, but it took some time for me to realize, one, what was causing these intermittent panic attacks, and two, how to go about getting rid of it.